What has been the one question on everyone's mind? No, it's not why are you still making videos. It's not what is the release date of Mount and Blade 2 Bannerlord anymore. That has been answered. But loads of people want to know how many players or troops you can get on the same battlefield. Now I'm going to be going over the single player today because of course we have no sort of idea of what we can get with the multiplayer, so that will just be completely guessing. But I've been going over some evidence, some interviews and some gameplay and putting together some ideas and answers. And pretty much I would say the confirmed answer from Tailwoods of what we can say about how big the battles will be in Mount and Blade 2 Bannerlord. Now, I was told in an interview while I was doing a live stream that the battles in single player would be about 1,000 troops, about 500 on each side at max. Now, the guy that told me this said the interview was in Turkish and he sent me the link on my email, so I checked it over. Now, obviously I don't speak Turkish, so I have to go and trust off what he said, saying that actually we're going to get 1,000 troops on the battlefield in the single player, 500 on each side. Now, we've heard this in developer blogs in the past and it's been a sort of the golden number. But I've never quite believed it because that seems a little bit too much. I mean, Mount & Blade Warband saw 150 troops in total, about 75 on each side if you had an even amount of armies against each other. So going up to 1,000 seems like a bit of a jump, but let's look into it. Well, in the Gamescom interviews and gameplay, we saw some single player battles over at the GameStar booth. Now, I made a full video analysis on this, so if you haven't seen it, go and check it out. But we can get an idea of the battle sizes here, or at least a first impression to set a baseline. The attacker's army, or the AI, have 1 man left on the battlefield, and they have 199 men that were killed, obviously making up 200 units that were spawned in on that side. The defender's army, or the player, has 449 men left, with 39 killed, which makes a total of 488. Well, you might think, well, this shows that it's a clear indication about 500 on each side. I mean, the defenders have almost 500 men on their side, so yeah, that should show that that is a great indication, proving the point of the interview, saying that they had 500 men as the max on that side. Well, yes, that would work if the game is played straight out with all the troops on the battlefield at once, and of course, troops on the battlefield at once is the number we're trying to find here, because of course in Warband you could have 500 or 600 men in your army, but you'd still only have 150 men on the battlefield at once, and it just sort out the ratios between your army and the other army's total numbers, and then put that ratio to fit the smaller battle size. But we want to find out how many men were on the field at once. And that's not how it's done in Mount and Blade. We can see throughout the battle that multiple times both sides have reinforcements coming into the game. Now this happens in Warband when a troop limit was 150, so each side could get the same ratio of men on the battlefield, and the rest of their numbers that weren't able to spawn at the beginning could be entered later on during reinforcement waves. So this 488 men on the defender's army seems more like 488 in total after all the reinforcement waves have entered. So not 488 on one side at one time. So whilst we have seen that number that looked like it would be possible, this isn't all the troops in one battlefield at one time, and that's really what we're trying to find. So let's look at another example to see if we can look deeper into this. Well, let's look at the siege. Now the siege once again has 442 attackers, and the defenders have very little men. So there's really not much to go off here. It is a very similar situation to the other one. But this is where we go on to another field battle where we see something quite interesting. Now this was an interview by Rocket Jump where we can see on one side 480 men and then 477 on the other. Now this is interesting. Both sides nearing 500 troops on the battlefield, so looking at the golden number that we've supposedly been told, so surely this answers it. Well, sorry to disappoint once again, but no. In this gameplay, more waves are being sent out, showing that these 900 or so troops on the battlefield aren't actually on the battlefield all at once. It's more of an illusion. There's more about 400 or 500 on the battlefield at once, which, yes, granted is way more than Warband, and looking at the gameplay, it is so good looking. It's enough to look like a large scale battle and to feel like one as well. It doesn't feel as small a scale as Warband does, and it looks like it's really pushing it, and I love the way it looks, how many men you can see here. But this doesn't look like it's the limit. So as I said, this looks to be more like 400 or 500 men on the battlefield at once, and that's great, but it's still not the 1,000 troops at once on the battlefield that we know and we really want to see. So I was about to give up on this search and settle with the fact that yes, whilst we have way more troops than Warband, it's not quite that 1,000 number that we've heard about over the past few years. But whilst I was live streaming, playing some Mount & Blade 2 Bannerlord beta, make sure you go and subscribe and put notifications on if you want to check out my live streams, someone mentioned to me, much like they mentioned to me about the interview, that like Warband, the multiplayer for Bannerlord still had a troop slider in it. You know, that slider when you go into the settings that lets you adjust the amount of units on the battlefield at one time. That was orientated towards a single player, but was also in the settings at multiplayer as well. It didn't affect anything in the multiplayer, but it was there anyway. So whilst I was playing in the beta, I went to check it out, and lo and behold, the max you can put it up to was that number. It was 1,000 troops. I was so happy when I found this, and it made sense now. Whilst yes, you can get 1,000 troops on the battlefield at once, it's more likely that during the Gamescom showcases that we saw, the slider would have been set lower, maybe 400 or 500 troops, which is what we saw in some of the gameplays. They probably put it a lot lower in the actual showcases to reduce lag, show as little frame rate drop as possible, because whilst you can get it up to 1,000, it's probably going to be quite taxing on the system. But this slider means that you're able to adjust it to how your PC runs. But because they set the slider down for the showcases to reduce lag, it made the game bring in the extra men that they had in their army during reinforcement phases, instead of all at once at the start of the battle, as it would have been if you had the slider set all the way up to the top to 1,000. So rest easy. If you have a beast PC, crank that number all the way up to the number 1,000 troops on the battlefield at once, which is an incredible number and hasn't really been done in a game before. You can get those incredible battles, use these massive formations, but even if you have a weaker PC, the game is still playable for you. Just put the number of troops down a little bit, and you'll use the reinforcing waves instead to build up your numbers instead of getting them all at the beginning. And I absolutely love this way of doing it, and it continues to do what Mount & Blade has always done, bring so many different people together with different walks of life just based on its accessibility. Whether you have a £300 laptop or a $4,000 computer rig, these games are accessible to everyone, and everyone will get enjoyment out of it. Whether someone gets more troops on the battlefield at once, it doesn't matter, because the core mechanics are still there, and it just adds that accessibility and that customization to help different types of people play the game. But I'm really happy that we have now found this, and I'm hoping this stays to be the confirmed number of troops on the battlefield. Do we know what multiplayer is going to be? Well, it's going to be completely guessing at the moment, so there's not really much point. Your guess is as good as mine when it comes to multiplayer battle size, but I'm hoping, seeing as the single player is way more than the Warband single player, the multiplayer is probably going to follow the same suit. But that has different issues. That comes down to server bandwidth and things as well, not just, you know, how well your PC can run it. But I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you leave a like on it and subscribe to the channel for more Mount & Blade 2 Bannerlord goodness. But until then, I will see you in the next one.